You're here because you're curious about self-directed learning. You want inspiration, practical tips, information, and a community of people to share your experiences with. Our guests' advice and tips will help us all to create the most enriching learning environment we can for our kids. If that makes you curious, you've come to the right place. So, let's learn how we can best facilitate our children in their learning pursuits. Welcome to the Rogue Learner Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Rogue Learner Podcast. If you're just tuning in for the first time, welcome. I have been so busy the last 4 weeks, and we have a ton of catching up to do. I do plan to fill you all in, but I'll wait until next week since today's interview is already a super long one. Welcome to all my new listeners. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Jenna Reich. I'm the host of the Rogue Learner Podcast, and I'm a mom of 2 awesome kids. My husband has joined me on the show periodically too, and his name is Chris. We are 1 year into our unschooling journey. In episode 24, my husband and I review our year of unschooling, so you can check that out if you're interested in hearing more about our experience. I started this podcast as a way to connect with other people on the same path and to learn along the way. I've been lucky enough to interview some of the most influential researchers in this space, and I hope to continue on with a quality show that provides you and me with some invaluable information that will help guide our decisions about how we live peacefully with our kids. I thought this show was going to focus mostly on education, but I'm realizing that so much of what I was searching for had little to do with academic learning and so much more to do with my connection with my kids and family. I hope this podcast inspires your family to connect and live a more peaceful existence together, one that puts respect for each other above all else. Today, I have the perfect guest on the show to speak on all of these specific topics. Summer is a grown unschooler who has never been to any formal schooling whatsoever. She's a unique find, even in the world of unschooling, because many children at least take some formal classes along their unschooling journey at some point. Her and her brothers were raised by their mother, who saw the value in building relationships with her kids and trusted that her kids would become the best versions of themselves if she just supported them and loved them unconditionally. This was before the days of internet and unschooling forums. So today you'll hear Summer's unique perspective on growing up in an uncoercive home. There are so many moments where I actually paused the interview while editing to write down a quote because she made so many profound points. Summer is located in Hawaii, and the day we recorded, they had a pretty big storm blowing through, which means that during the last segment where I asked my guests the same 4 questions, Summer's audio went out. So we couldn't get a connection after that point, so I missed asking her the last 2 questions, getting her contact details, and saying goodbye. So I do apologize in advance for the abrupt ending to the episode today. Last thing before we kick off the show, I'm giving away Free to Learn by Peter Gray or Changing Our Minds by Naomi Fisher. To enter into the drawing for your chance to win, all you have to do is leave a written review on Apple Podcasts, then email me with the book you'd like to win and the screen name you left your review under. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and I really hope you enjoy the interview. If you would like to be added to the conversation in some way, you can connect with me in the Facebook group, on Instagram, or click the voicemail link to leave a response to today's show, and or co-host a show with me by clicking the link that says, "Join me on the show." Either way, I can't wait to hear from you. All right, let's get on with today's show. Here's my interview with Summer. Enjoy. Hi, Summer. Welcome to the show.
Aloha.
You are in lovely Hawaii, and I'm quite jealous. I hear all your lovely sounds in the background.
Yes, all the birds. Morning here, so all the birds and roosters are pretty active.
I love it. I'm like wrapping up my day, so I'm like on the opposite end of the spectrum, very tired and drained from being out in the cold.
It's so fun. I love that we can communicate like through time and space all at once.
It's so awesome, isn't it? I love that. That's the one good thing about technology. Well, I guess there's a few things, but I really like that too. So I am so eager to talk to you because I think it's a really rare treat to find somebody who has thoroughly been unschooled their entire lives. And not only that, but has never had any formal schooling or formal classes or anything like that in their lives. That's, I think, quite rare. I think you even mentioned that you haven't met, have you met anyone that has had that same experience as you?
I don't think so. I've met a lot of homeschoolers and I've met a few unschoolers over the years, but I haven't actually met anyone that was like 100% unschooled from the start. Most people that I've met who are unschooled did do either some public school or some Waldorf or, a little bit of something in the beginning before their parents chose to go the unschooling route. So
Right.
it's my brothers and I seem to be kind of an anomaly, and I didn't actually really realize that until somewhat recently. I mean, I knew there wasn't a lot of us out there, but I didn't realize that I was one of the oldest fully unschooled people willing to even talk or share my experiences. So I've been getting a lot of interest lately.
You're like museum worthy, right? Like you're like, like, ooh, look at this specimen. Yeah, because I think, I mean, for the most part, a lot of unschooling or homeschooling families have their kids take some sort of classes along the way, or they go to high school for a year and try it out,
Mm-hmm.
or,
Mm-hmm.
they get curious or then they go off to trade schools or colleges and in their
Yeah.
adult lives, right? So I wanted to actually get started with the word unschooling because I think you have a different definition than maybe what other people have. And I think your perspective is really important to be shared because you're the one who's actually experienced it. And I think for parents who are unschooling their kids or sending them to self-directed schools, it's really comforting, not only comforting, but just it's something that we all are really curious about is to hear from someone who's experienced it, obviously, because we are choosing this for our children, right? And so we
Mm-hmm.
want to know that this is a good choice and
Yeah.
who else to ask but somebody who's actually
Right.
experienced it for
Right.
themselves. So yeah, let's start there.
Well, I've heard it's funny you said that, like wondering if it's a good choice, because I've had people ask me that before. Like, do you think unschooling is good for all children, or is it just like school where some kids do well and some kids don't? And I kind of boggled by that question sometimes because to me, unschooling is really just life without this idea that you have to force human beings against their will to do things you think they should do. So to me, it's like, how can that not be good for anyone? Like, life is good for everyone. Life is good for every child. Every child is good for life. So I don't understand how it can be not good for some people. And people are, well, my kids aren't self-motivated. And I'm like, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around this idea that unschooling wouldn't be good or wouldn't work, quotations, for some children, because I feel like it's life. How can life not be good for someone? It's just life without this idea that we have to be compelled, manipulated, coerced, bribed, forced into becoming something that other people think we should be, or learning things that we're not interested in, learning things that aren't useful to us, of following some program that someone else made up somewhere that never even met you. So I don't see how that could be. It doesn't make sense to me. I think I come from this really different place of not having this lifetime of programming. So I get questions from parents sometimes, and it honestly takes me a minute to respond because I don't understand the question. I won't understand where it's coming from. I'm like, what do you mean? Why would you think someone would need that? It's really interesting to me. So the term unschooling is, I've kind of grown uncomfortable with the term, to be honest, because I used to use it very proudly, and it was a term that my family kind of fought for over the years. I mean, I'm 32 now. My oldest brother's going to be 40. So 40 years ago, when this all started for my mom, like, there wasn't even a thing. Like, no one had even heard of homeschooling in the area I grew up in, let alone unschooling. So it was kind of this term that we we protected and we fought for. And lately I've been realizing that this term unschooling means some really different things to different people, and it does not mean what I thought it meant. And so that's been a little sad for me. I'm kind of needing to let go of and move on from that term, because to me, the most basic definition of the term unschooling is no forced education. Like, that's the absolute most basic, boiled down version. It is no forced education. And I'm hearing people sometimes say this thing where they're like, well, we do some required math and then we unschool for the rest of it. And I'm like, that's not even possible. If you understood, like, to me, if you understood the first thing about unschooling, you would understand that if there's any kind of if you're requiring your child to use their brain in ways that they are uncomfortable with, uninterested in, unready for, or unwilling to, then you go against everything unschooling stands for. So to me, unschooling isn't like a part-time thing. It's not like a method that you can like use on your kids sometimes when you feel like it. It's not like this thing that you can like throw in. So that's been interesting for me to like come to seeing that people have like, I don't know what it is that people think unschooling is, if it's something that you can use sometimes. Like, to me, it's not something you can use. It's actually, it's a whole way of life, and it's a philosophy based on respect, absolute respect and honor of a human being. And it's, to me, like the obvious, it's almost like a byproduct. Like, unschooling to me is more of a symptom or a byproduct of choosing to live in peace and harmony with children. Because the way that I was raised was so much more than just not going to school. Like, unschooling, yes, it means no forced education, but it's about like where that comes from and why you choose to do that. And if you're choosing to not put your kids in, it kind of goes into a whole thing, but basically, like in my family, for my mom, she chose to unschool. And it wasn't like this conscious choice of like, I'm going to unschool so that. It was actually like, I want to live in peace and harmony with my children. Oh, I guess that means we're unschooling, because that is the what she felt like was the most respectful and non-violent way to raise her kids, was to not force us against our will. And she didn't feel like she was in a position, like a higher position than her children. Like, she felt like, who am I to tell another human being how they should be or what they should do with their lives? And so it was really more of we were a small tribe, the 5 of us, my mom and my 3 brothers and myself. And it was more about friendship and partnership and cooperation and living in peace and harmony together. My mom really trusts our natural human instincts to evolve. She just could see that. Like, we would walk and we would talk all like with very little assistance. And she probably couldn't have stopped us if we tried. And she just was like, why would anything be any different? Of course, they will just continue to grow and evolve. Like, everyone wants to thrive and be independent. So why would they not learn all the things that they would need to do that?
Where do you think she got this original thought? I mean, it's such a progressive thought, especially if you haven't, like I found it through Googling,
Yeah.
I mean, this is not an era of time where there was just information laden sites.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we didn't have the internet. We didn't even have computers. We didn't, it was not the time of screens. And so, no, my mom, well, I mean, she tells the story better. I tend to get the details jumbled up because it's not actually from my own memory. But she had my oldest brother really young. She was 21. And she didn't actually know that she was going to do anything different than anyone else. When my brother came along, and she just like fell madly in love with this tiny human, and just like, I don't know, she has like a really deep maternal instinct, and she just like gave her life to us. She did try to put my older brother in like a daycare at one point, and she just thought it was the most bizarre thing. Like, she's in love with this child. Why would I hand him to random strangers to be raised? Like, this is weird. And why would I leave him in a group of children where there's like one adult and they're not going to get enough love and attention? And I think she really just, something in her just thought it was odd, and it just went against her intuition. And my mom is very heart-based and intuitive and really listens to her gut instincts. And somehow she was able to get in touch with that and listen to that. And she just knew something in her told her that it was wrong to just leave her kid with strangers that didn't even love or care for him the way that she did. And why would she want to miss everything? So to her, it was actually kind of a selfish choice. And she likes to say, like, she did it for herself. She didn't do it for us. She did it so that she could hang out with us because she liked us, and a lot of other reasons. And it was just kind of little by little. It was one thing after another. Unschooling kind of came a little bit later. But it was like, why would I put my baby in a crib to cry themselves to sleep? Like, that's denying their own natural impulse to be connected to me and my natural impulse to be connected to them. Like, why would we have these impulses if they were wrong? And so it kind of came from like trusting life, like growing this trust in life and nature and just the natural bond between mother and child. And she didn't understand why you should break that forcefully. And she felt like it was there for a reason, why we have this draw to our mothers and why we have this attachment. It's healthy attachment. So it stemmed from something different. It didn't stem from education. It stemmed actually more from this mother-child bond, this connection, this relationship. She just felt like there had to be another way. Like, why we don't have to break this, and we don't have to push our children away, and we don't have to be fighting and angry at each other, and we can have a peaceful, beautiful, harmonious home and be friends and be close. And she was right. She was absolutely right. And it took, it was a really long journey for her. It was like many, many years and a lot of really deep self-inquiry and discovery and working on her own personal issues in order to stay connected with us and to recognize the things that break that connection and why we do them and what they cause, and the psychological and emotional trauma that we cause children all the time, like completely unconsciously.
Yeah, I think that's what's really difficult for a lot of parents today. And I mean, I speak for myself, is this deschooling that has to go on the adult side to even get to a point where you can trust and live that lifestyle. I always say it's going to be a lifelong process because
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, because we're inundated with so much information from all areas of our lives that don't live this way and don't have these ideals. And it's just a constant reflection and reframe, and it's daily.
You were trained, like most adults are trained their whole lives, to not follow their instincts, they're not free to make their own choices. They're told that they're not smart enough, they're not good enough, other people know best for you. You should do what other people say and what other people want. And that's how you're trained. Your whole childhood is not to trust yourself, not to listen to your own instincts. And so when you get to be where you have your own children, that's like you don't even know how to get in touch with that anymore. And how can you allow your children that kind of freedom if you don't allow it for yourself? That's her place that she likes to talk about, is it's about freeing yourself. And now we have this term deschooling, which I've only discovered recently, actually just in the last year, like, oh, deschooling, that's a thing. My mom's like, yeah, actually, you call it what you will, but to her, it's about freeing yourself. And because how can you allow someone else to be free if you yourself are not, emotionally and psychologically, and how can you trust your child if you don't? So it's definitely beautiful. I think that people have come up with this deschooling idea, and that there's a lot of resources and support for that now. And that's really cool because I think it's really, really important that the kids are fine. Like, kids are fine. They're fine. It's the parents really that have the struggle, and it's a lot of work. It's hard work. It's kind of reminds me, the more and more I get into these conversations with parents, it very much reminds me of deprogramming someone from a cult. It's like you're in this cult mindset of what education is and how children learn and how we have to train them to make them behave properly in society. And that's a whole belief system, and which is part of a much larger system. When you start to deprogram from that, it's like you're leaving a cult, and you have to like deprogram this whole thought system in order to be able to see something else.
Yeah, it's a struggle. Like,
It's a huge
it is
struggle.
work.
Yeah.
It's a
I can't,
job.
I can't personally relate, obviously. I mean, to some degree, we all have programming of some kind, So I'm sure, I've got some of it as well, but I don't have the same from like the public school system. I was raised to always trust myself. And I was always told that I know what's best for me and that no one has the right or authority to tell me what I should or shouldn't do with myself and my life, with my mind, with my body, with my emotions, with my beliefs. I was always told that I know that it's up to me, that I know that I'm responsible for myself and I know what's right for myself in my life. And I was told that through, and when I say I was told that, it's not just that I was told that verbally, like my mom told me that. I was told that every day in how I was treated.
Mm.
Actually, what I could say is I was never told otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Is more like I was allowed to keep that. And I was never told otherwise.
Mm. Yeah, there's a difference there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a difference. It's not like I had to be taught that. I really just had to not be taught the opposite of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I talked about this with Naomi Fisher. She's a psychologist who just recently published a book about self-directed education. And we talked about how there's a lot of things we learn in school that are not explicitly taught, obviously, but things like, oh, you are not good enough, or oh, you don't look good enough, or I mean, they're just subtle but constant and daily reminders that you either fit the bill or you don't. And those lessons actually are so much more powerful than the actual academics that go on. Over time constructs the human that comes out the other end, essentially, right?
Yeah, and that is actually a point that I bring up a lot when I'm talking to unschooling parents, is that I feel like, academic learning, so math and science, reading, those things can be learned actually at any time in life. I mean, any time. You can learn that stuff when you're 80 if you want. Like, there's nothing stopping you at any point in your life to learn any kind of academic education at all. But there are certain things that absolutely get learned at certain stages in life, and they cannot be avoided, and they are extremely difficult to unlearn later on. And these are these deep psychological, emotional decisions that we make about ourselves, these beliefs that we develop through really young, super young, we're talking 2, 3, 4 years old, like right in that age range is when most of us make these decisions about ourselves, and they're based on our environment and how we're treated. And sometimes it's something really subtle. Sometimes it's something really big. And we get lots of these through our childhood. And that's what kind of develops our personalities in a way, certain coping mechanisms, you could say, defenses and coping mechanisms. When you're 3 or 4 and you hand grandma a picture, and instead of saying, "That's beautiful," she says, "That's a funny looking tree." And then all of a sudden in your head, you go, "I'm not artistic." And then you carry that around with you the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You carry that around with you, and it's like and then you find more proof for it along the way. So you get these little seeds when you're young. A lot of people who have these really deep beliefs, they can't even find where they came from. I'm stupid. I'm ugly. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm not trustworthy. I'm not respectable. Like all these kinds of things. And they happen really young, and they stick. They stick. And I think it's really heartbreaking to me when I see people sacrificing these emotional decisions, like, okay, well, my kid might think they're stupid, but at least they'll have learned math. And it's like, no, you can learn math a lot easier later on than you can learn that you're not stupid, because it's like, it's hard to explain, but I feel like we all have these beliefs about ourselves, and oftentimes we don't know where they came from.
And today, even, I have an example of a moment where I felt really just sorry for our society and where we're at, because there was a teenager at one of the groups, and he was talking about all the things that he's good at, and so it can go the other way. But but he was like, I'm good at English, I'm good at math and whatever. And I thought, okay, but that also can be like, it's the mindset needs to be, I can learn anything and I can be good at anything. And to me, like, even just saying these are the things that I'm good at is
limiting.
Subtracting, right? It's limiting all the things that you may possibly be good at that you are.
Yeah, like saying that like I'm good at this thing can kind of be like you're saying you're not good at something else.
People go into high school and then maybe they get they base it off of their grades, right? So they get really good grades in math and science, let's say, and then they choose a career in math and science because they've always been told you're just really good at math and science. But what I would like to see change is not following things based on a specific credential you've passed, but actually things that you're really truly curious about and you really want to know more about or do better with or provide some sort of value to the world in.
And it's absolutely possible. I mean, on that same topic, you're just reminding me of like one of the very common questions I get when people find out I was unschooled. And from people who are unschooling or interested in unschooling. And one of the most common questions I get are, how did you learn how to read? And how did you learn how to write? And, those basic things. And then the other question is, well, what are you doing now? What are your brothers doing now? What did you grow up to be? And what are you doing in the world? And are you successful? And are you supporting yourself? And then, that's what people want to know. And that to me is tragic. That is tragic that's your concern, that's your question is, what is my kid? Is my kid going to be okay in the world? Are they going to be successful? Are they going to be smart? Are they going to learn if I leave them alone? I really think it's sad that that's your first concern. Not that that's not a concern, but it's really sad that's the first thing that comes up that people want to talk to me about. No one has ever gone, oh, wow, you're unschooled. Do you have healthy relationships in your life? Like, are you happy? Have you found joy? Are you living the life that you love? No one asks that. They all want to know if like monetary success. That's what they're asking.
Well, that's what our society values. So
no one is asking about my mental or emotional state. Like that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And to me, that's like, if that's why you're unschooling is so that your kids will be maybe more successful, I can't help you. My mom told me when I was little, I remember this conversation. And I think it had to do with some pressure from some grandparents or something. And me being kind of like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, because people would ask me that. And I think it's the worst thing you can possibly ask a child. She said, honey, she's like, I don't care what you do with your life. Like, I don't care if you want to be the garbage man, if you want to work at a gas station forever. I don't care. I care that you follow your heart and you do what feels right for you and you stay true to yourself. That's what I care about. And it was like the pressure was completely off. I can be myself, and whatever that ends up looking like in the world. And so if you want anything other than your child to be themselves and live their truth, then you're going to be looking for a method to change and fix them, to alter their behavior and to change how they act in the world. I don't think unschooling can help you with that. At least not my version of unschooling. At least not my version of unschooling and my mom's parenting philosophy at all, because it was all about allowing us to be who we already are. It wasn't about making us someone someday. Are you only going to respect your child's autonomy and independence if it makes them a better person someday? Or are you going to do it because it's what's right now for you? And because it's the only nonviolent choice in being with children. Like, to me, it's the only nonviolent choice, because anytime that you begin to force another human being against their will to do anything, and you manipulate, coerce, bribe, anything, it's violence. It's violence against another human being, and I don't care how old they are. And so if you're going to make that choice just because of the outcome, and you're going to be like, well, I'll respect you now because someday it might have a good effect on you, I feel like you're in it for the wrong reasons. But if you respect your child now because that's what's right for you, is to be respectful human being, I feel like that's what's going to have even more powerful effect on your child, because we can feel you can feel when someone's coming from a place of truth. Like children, especially, they can feel when you have an ulterior motive or agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're treating them a certain way so that they will be a certain way, it's going to backfire because they know, they can sense it. I've seen it. I've, spent so many years in childcare myself. Like I can see it when I do that with a child. If I have any kind of manipulative behavior, if I say something so that they will a certain, any of that, it always backfires. It really is about you. It's not about the child. It's about you doing what's right for yourself right now. Like, do you want to be this manipulative, controlling human being to other human beings, regardless if it's your own child or your partner or your friend? So it's about how you want to be in the world, not how you want your kids to be in the world. And I think that's what's going to affect them the most, is how you are. And that's what it was with my mom. It's like, I learned from who she was, not necessarily what she did, if that makes sense. It's about like the place that she was coming from. And that's why often people want like some kind of formula or like a method. Like someone asked me recently, like, well, what age should I wait before I introduce screens to my children? And I was like, I'm not an authority. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Like it's about where you're coming from and where that choice is coming from and how you see your child. And every child is unique and every parent is unique and every situation is unique. So there's not like this answer, this formula. And that's the thing, is like people have that comfort in school, in the school system, because it's like, we know at this age we're supposed to do this and this age we're supposed to do that. And it's like you have rules to follow. And parents are comfortable with that because they were raised that way, to rely on someone else telling them what to do. And now you have someone else telling you what to do with your own children and telling your children what to do. And you never have to think for yourself. You can be lazy. You don't have to like look within yourself and seek out these answers and follow your own intuition and your gut and maybe be different and weird. You don't have to do that. That's hard. Being sovereign, like being independent, it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable. It's not, you don't just get to like, oh, I just sit around and do whatever I want all day. I'm a self-employed artist. Like I have my own business, and people say things to me like, oh, if you do what you love, it's not work. And I'm like, that is complete ludicrous. Like this is hard work to be self-motivated, to be responsible for yourself, to be free is hard. But being told what to do and following orders, that's easy. You just keep your head down. You do what you're told to do. You don't question. Everything's mapped out for you. You don't have to dig deep within yourself to find your own truth and your own answers and maybe have them be different than other people's and challenge other people. Basically, with school, you have it's all laid out for you. You don't have to question or wonder. And my mom said, I didn't not send you to school to like just put you into another system. And I feel like a lot of people are doing that. They're taking their child out of school. They want to unschool, they want to homeschool, but they want this very specific, they still want a guidebook. They want a rule book. They want a method that they can use on their kids that will work, instead of like finding their own truth within themselves and having this unique relationship with their very unique and original child. Like it's going to be different for everyone. If you're actually present with life itself with your child, then it's going to be completely unique than anyone else, even in the unschooling community. So a lot of people are like, they've thrown out this one rule book, but they're floundering because they're looking for another manual. Oh, at this age, we'll do this, and I'll introduce screens at this age because this is developmentally appropriate. And it's like, it's still just this wanting to follow someone else's directions and not be responsible for your own choices. At least that's how I see it. I think it's very unconscious. I don't mean anyone's doing this on purpose at all, but I think it's absolutely terrifying for most people to take that leap. Like my mom, it wasn't easy. It was hard. She struggled. It was grueling. It's a lifelong thing. She's still doing her own interpersonal work. You can't just stop and be like, I have the answers now. This is how you raise kids. This is the way you educate. This is how all children learn. Like we're never going to have those answers because we're all unique individuals. So it's going to be different for everyone, and every relationship is unique. And I think that's what it's about for me, is it's about the relationship and allowing that relationship to change and evolve and teach you, and to be constantly learning from that relationship like you do with other relationships.
Yeah, I think the problem with it is that most people don't have healthy relationships with themselves.
Yes.
So you can't have a good relationship with anybody unless you have a good relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, it goes back to the deschooling. I just find that such an important piece. And almost, looking back, if I could change one thing, like in retrospect, I think I would have spent a lot more time deschooling myself before deschooling my children.
Yeah.
Like I would have spent maybe a year, and I did to some degree, but I would say that like the intentionality was not for home educating. It was more about like, I wanted it for myself. I was like in that stage of life where I was just kind of questioning and reflecting, but not with the intention of getting to a specific point where I could pull my kids out of school. I didn't have that foresight, but I really wish I would have, at the moment I was like, okay, I am ready to home educate. I would have started deschooling myself and then waiting a long time until I was properly ready to have the trust, and know that this was like, be confident in my decision. Because as I was, like pulling it all out and figuring it all out for myself, I was at the same time trying to help my kids along the deschooling process. And it was actually really turbulent, I mean, and it still is to some degree. So I think that process is just so critical and so instrumental in having a successful beginning. And, you talked about how people may do things on a certain schedule based on the system, right? Like, okay, they go to school at age 3 or, preschool, and then at 5, they start kindergarten. And these are the things that people say is developmentally appropriate and they should read at age 6 or whatever. Okay. We follow these guidelines.
Well, and then it goes on too. I mean, a lot of adults are still following that model that our society had made up. It's just made up anyways, and people are still following that model. And a lot of people are breaking out of it now, but then they're still sending their kids to training for that model. So, and what I mean by that is like, you get out of high school, you go to college, and then you get married at a certain age, you buy a house at a certain age, you have a kid at a certain age, you've got this career. It's like that whole model, that like American dream picket fence thing. It's like a lot of people are opting out of that now and having really different lives and choosing really different points in their life to have these experiences. A lot of people aren't getting married until way later. Some people choosing not to have children. People, it's like we're not following all this same model anymore. And yet we're still sending our kids into this system that's training them for that model. And so it's kind of funny, like we're still sending them for the first leg of that rat race, but then we also want them to like not be part of that rat race. But we're still going to train them for it. So it's kind of funny. It's like, why, I want my children to be successful and independent and all these things. And a lot of people, like their whole dream is to get out of this rat race. Their whole dream is to not have to work a 9 to 5. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be more successful. They want freedom to travel. They want more time off. They want more time with their family.
Well, and maybe they don't want to be shackled by debt.
Yeah. And all that. Exactly. Student loan debt and like all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's a whole thing. And so a lot of people are like, well, I don't want that for my children. And then they're still sending them to the first leg of the training program for that life. And I find that really strange.
Right. And well, I think that, the people who are waking up to this idea are people who are our age and are now experiencing that for ourselves. So we're we're realizing, oh, wait a minute, this isn't actually what I want. And so maybe my kids don't want it.
It's not actually fulfilling and it's not actually necessary, and that you can set up your life in any which way. And there isn't a right or wrong way. And you don't have to follow this timeline that's arbitrary. It's totally just made up anyways, It's like it's just made up. It's not real. It's not true. It's just an idea. So it's funny that we all kind of have bought into this idea that we have to have this certain kind of life, that life happens in these certain stages. And if you didn't know and you could just live in the mystery, you would enjoy a lot more what's happening now. And instead of trying to follow this whole thing. And there's so many different ways of living too. It's like I started my own business. I was only I think I started making glass beads when I was about 14. And I started selling my work at like local craft fairs and farmers markets at 16. Like I started my own business, was making my own money at 16. Because no one told me that wasn't a thing. No one told me like I couldn't do that, or that I had to wait till a certain age, or I had to finish high school first and then I had to go get a degree so that I could have a good career, so that I could blah, 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 blah. Like no one told me that. I didn't have that idea shoved down my throat. So I made up my own path. I started doing what I love as I loved it. It was like I was able to pursue those things as they came along, instead of like, no, that's just a hobby for later. That's not really a career. And I remember like my dad actually having those kind of ideas, because he wasn't super on board with the whole unschooling thing. My parents split up when I was a baby. So I remember conversations with him like through my teens and my early 20s where he was like, that's a nice hobby, but you should still get an education and go to college and get a degree so you can support yourself and not become dependent on a man. And and part of me was like, have you met me, Dad? Like, that's never going to happen. But I understood, because my mom had explained to me when I was young about my dad's family. I understood that it came from love and fear. So I didn't blame him. But it was a little bit sad for me, to have him not trust and believe in me the way that my mom did. But he came around, though. He came around. And at some point in my early 20s, I was working for a glassblowing artist on the Big Island. And my dad came to visit. I took him to the shop and he saw my friend's place and he was like, wait, that guy, he pays for that house and all that and the wife and the car, everything through just making art. And I was like, yeah, Dad. And he was like, whoa. And it was that moment on, he never, ever mentioned anything about me should be doing anything different with my life. And now he fully supports my glass blowing as a career. Like he didn't see it as a career before, he saw it as like a hobby. I also, one of the things that I probably did differently was I learned as I did things instead of pre-learning. Like a lot of people think, that's what school's for, right? It's
preparation.
It's preparation. It's like you pre-learn, right? So
they even call them preparatory schools.
Preparatory schools, yeah. So they have preparation for life, because what you're doing right now isn't life somehow. And so yeah, preparation. So like I like to talk about that because it's kind of funny to me. There are some things that you need to learn ahead of time that you need to prepare for, obviously, right? Like it's like if I'm going to have a surgery, I want that doctor to have prepared, like I want him educated. Right. But there's a lot of things that you can learn as you go along. I guess everything in a sense can be learned as you go along. Like you work your way up in a way. And so I always find it funny how people are like, they take these individual elements like out of an activity, out of life, right? So you like extract this one element from life and then you teach it separately, like on its own, completely out of context in order to pre-learn it for when it's going to be in context, which makes zero sense to me. Zero sense. You're like, okay, we're going to take this thing out of here and learn about it separately so that we can then use it when we put it all back together. And you're like, well, why don't we just learn it all together? Like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we separating out these things? We call them subjects, right? We take like one small element out and we try to learn it separately on its own with no application or purpose, really. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just math all by itself. And we want kids to like learn this thing and memorize this thing when it has zero relevance to them or their life, zero application. Like they can't see the point at all. And yet you expect them to like somehow retain this information so that someday, maybe, and this is a maybe, like except for the very basic math, maybe your kid might need that somewhere down the road when it actually applies to real life. But then see, they won't have used it in real life. So it's going to be another struggle and learning process, and they'll have a hard time remembering what they learned because it didn't actually have any purpose or point to them at the time. So I think that's really funny because I learned things as I went along. And some people enjoy pre-learning. Like my older brother, he likes studying things for what they are for the sake of learning. I'm not really that way. I like to just jump in and like go for it and learn as I go along. So we all have these really unique ways of learning as well. It's fascinating to me how we put kids in the school system when it's like, to me, just look at me and my brothers, like we all have these very unique ways of learning and acquiring and absorbing information. And it would have been just a tragedy had we been forced to absorb it in a certain way. Like some of us probably would have been labeled stupid for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I just have two kids. And so, you would think that there wouldn't be such a huge discrepancy in the way that they have the same parents, they've grown up in the same house, like all the things, but they could not be any more different. Everything about them is so unique to them as individuals. And it's remarkable to me that they survived the school system, and they really did well, actually. They were super successful in school, but at the cost of still thinking, like what we talked about before, the cost was that they have definite perceived opinions about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, for example, my son, who is incredibly gifted in anything like mathematical, logical, that sort of thing, he says that he's not good at math.
Yeah.
And that just blows my mind. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he also always talks about how he's not very good at German, but he learned the language in like 18 months and was able to do the work of a first grader with all the other first graders within a year. And but he has this perception that he's not any good. So that can't possibly have come from us or him, that was external.
Yeah. And he made it mean something about himself, because it's different than being like, I'm not very good at this thing, but it doesn't actually mean anything about who you are. But like children, oftentimes when something like that happens and they're like, I'm not good at this thing, that means I'm stupid. So it's like they actually make it mean something about themselves and about who they are as a human being. And that's what we do in our society. And that's what the school system does. We make what you do mean something about who you are. And so kids have this idea that they're not good enough because they can't do the things other kids do, or the things that adults are trying to make them do at a certain time, or they're rebelling or whatever it is. And so it's like, I can easily say like, oh, I'm not good at that thing. But that's just saying I'm not good at that thing. It doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean that I'm any less valuable or less lovable or less intelligent. It just means I'm not good at that thing. That's all it means. But in our society and in the school system, that's not all it means. We make it mean like all this stuff about you. If you're not good at math, it means that, you're not going to be, it means something about your future. If you're not good at math, it means you're not very intelligent. And if you think you're not very intelligent, then you're going to struggle in other areas as well, because you're going to be operating from that belief, which will make you probably unintelligent. I know that when I'm afraid of acting a certain way, I act more that way. Or if I'm afraid of what this person thinks of me, I'll be even weirder around them. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think when you're acting from that place of I'm stupid, you'll make mistakes. So when you're a kid and you have this idea like I'm stupid, and then you're trying so hard to prove that you're not stupid, it's like you end up making a lot of mistakes because you're so nervous and you're trying so hard that you're not just being yourself and being natural and present with what is.
Yeah, it's fear-based.
It's fear-based and you're overcompensating.
Yeah. So I know that people are going to wonder, though, like, what was your experience with reading, writing, and math? Because you sound like somebody who was like, okay, I'm motivated to do this. I want to do it. And then you essentially do it, or you jump right in, feet first. So what was your experience with those specific, because these are like the things that people are always just so worried about. And my experience is so different. I can't relate to that because my kids already do those things quite proficiently,
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a huge one. It's always about like, what about reading? It's really the big one. It's reading is the big one. If I don't make my kid learn how to read, how are they going to learn how to read? And firstly, I want to say about that is I feel like a lot of adults have this idea that their kid has to be motivated and make a decision in order to learn. And I think that's not how it occurs to me at all. Learning happens on accident, like right and left every second of the day. It's like not something you actually really have to do on purpose in that sense. Like, I don't feel like it's necessary for a child to have this motivation, like, oh, I'm interested in this thing. I think I'm going to discover more about this. I've made a decision to explore this and learn about this more. Like, that's not how it works. Like if you watch them when they're tiny, like I babysit this 1.5-year-old little girl once a week right now. I just love observing, like this age is so magical. She doesn't make a decision to learn about something. She just picks a thing up and puts it in the other thing. And she's just doing, she's just doing and experiencing and being in the moment. Like she doesn't have to have this whole psychological process to get to a point where she's learning something. Learning is already happening before you even think about it.